Tony Popovic has named his 26-man squad for the Socceroos to take on Japan and Saudi Arabia in what will be two excruciatingly important games for Australia to qualify for the next FIFA Men's World Cup. Christian Montegan is joining me today. G'day, Christian. It's an interesting team. Obviously, we're coming off the back of an A-League Grand Final and an A-League season where a lot of players that have stood out in this campaign have probably been overlooked, but the big story here is the one player that was expected to be included is Matt Leckie. Obviously had a heroic day in the grand final, won the Joe Marston medal, and we learnt afterwards played not only with that nose gash, but a strained hamstring that he picked up during training in midweek. And he did that at the sacrifice of his Socceroos selection.
Absolutely heroic effort. I mean, to learn that afterwards that he was actually coming to the game with a hamstring injury and then to produce that kind of performance, man of the match, win that Joe Marston medal, that's just unbelievable. So just goes to show, like, he just puts his body on the line every single time, and that's a true leader, right? And Aurelio Vidmar alluded to that in his post-match presser. But obviously, yes, it's come at a cost, right? He can't play with the Socceroos. He's been left out because of it as a result. So for Popper, it's a big blow because he needs all his experienced players at his disposal to win these last two games against Japan and Saudi. So he'll be looking at that as a massive blow for the squad. But that doesn't mean that there's other players in there who can step up to the plate and take his position. But at the same time, it is a really disappointing thing to see, especially given Leckie's been building himself into a bit of form now since, trying to obviously manage his body throughout the season, a couple of injuries here and there. It seemed as though he was really on track to potentially even start for the Socceroos or at least make a big impact. But obviously with this development, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, he said after the game he feels like he just needs a rest, a bit of a break as well, and hopefully he can get that in the off-season, get his body right. Obviously, in a World Cup year, next campaign, he's going to be keen to get that sorted. I did find it interesting. Popper was asked when he found out about the hamstring because, as far as we know, he was set to be included. And the Socceroos staff were on a flight to Perth last night during the grand final, so they didn't see the whole nose gash live. But yeah, I imagine Melbourne City would have been trying to keep that injury pretty quiet because they wouldn't have wanted Melbourne Victory to use that to their advantage. So he was asked about it in the press conference and didn't really answer the question at all. So my suspicions are, Christian, that maybe that news came a little bit late in the day.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think they would have let Victory have any sort of new information that they could have taken into the game. They would have said, okay, if they knew the information, they would have said, let's target Leckie as much as possible. But even so, like we saw Leckie, right, as I mentioned, he won the Joe Marston medal. It's not like he was invisible or had a poor game. He was actually a standout for City. So, I mean, if they shared the news or they didn't, I don't think it would have made much of a difference in the end, to be honest. But that was probably a tactic that Vidmar had up his sleeve to try and keep, as low-key as possible. But interesting to know if like Popovic was probably a bit annoyed that they didn't really receive that news, behind closed doors, at least a one-on-one conversation to say, okay, this is what's happening. So yeah, that dynamic would be interesting to learn a bit more about.
Yeah, I wonder when he found out. That would be very interesting for sure. Let's take a look at some of the other names, of course, for Melbourne City's champions. Kai Truen, Aziz Beige and Marco Tilio all make the squad. Tilio's had a really good return to the season. On the flip side of the grand final, interestingly, Daniel Arzani and Ryan Teague were probably both expected to make the squad. But Casey Boss, Christian, I think is a really interesting one. Now, he's obviously a young player and he plays for Melbourne Victory, so we know where a majority of people are going to go with this. Obviously, Popovic was there last season. For me, he's got just enough credit in the bank with the surprise selections of Nishan Volupale and Daniel Arzani in the last few windows for me to just let him have this one. And whether Casey Boss gets any actual meaningful game time is yet to be seen. But for me, he's got results in the last few windows with these controversial picks, so I think he's allowed to do what he wants for now.
He's got a bit of luxury, doesn't he? Because if he got those few moves wrong with Volupale and Arzani, if they didn't perform, then there would have been a lot more scrutiny seeing this selection with Casey Boss. But again, it goes to show that Popper's experience with these types of players, he knows them, right? He knows how to integrate them in the team. And that's the advantage that, he sort of sees it as, okay, I've worked with these players before. I can get the best out of them. And we've seen that obviously with Arzani and Volupale in the previous Socceroos squads. And this perhaps might be no different. Obviously not expecting Boss to make a major impact, especially not the start at least, but to at least surround him in that environment. 1 year out from a World Cup, cycle could be important. He might be a crucial factor or a piece in the puzzle come 12 months time if we do qualify. So I don't think I guess too many complaints, because Boss, it's not like he's had a poor season, right? He's been influential for large parts of Victory's season, getting into that grand final in the first place. So let's see what happens if he does get a lot of game time or not. But I mean, those names you mentioned as well with Tilio, that's a no-brainer. He's just been absolutely tremendous throughout the whole campaign, and Kai Truan as well at the back for City, who they've been so resolute in defence, and obviously the best defensive record in the regular season in the A-League. So he's been a big part of that as well. So a lot of pieces there for Popper to work with.
I wonder what the celebrations were for those few City players last night. I couldn't go too hard after the grand final. Had to be responsible on a plane early Sunday after the national team. The other youngster that's probably raising a lot of eyebrows, Paul Ocon Engsler. He was crucial to the under-20 success at the Asian Cup a few months ago. He was selected in the training squad, the warm weather training squad up in the UAE, I think it was. So he's been able to get looked at by Popovic and the staff. For me, he was the best player of that tournament. He's the best player of that under-20 team. There is a few other names competing with that, but he plays at the base of midfield. But I think the comparison that a lot of people draw, obviously, you're looking at the likes of Max Ballard and Nectar Triantis, who Triantis, withdrew from the training squad. The quote that Popper just gave in the press conference was he had some other things on, which seems so odd of a thing to say about denying a selection to your national team. Obviously, he's got a lot on his mind, Popper said as well. So that situation is one to look out for, but definitely in comparison to Max Ballard, Ocon Engsler represents probably a controversial pick in that position.
It does slightly, given, I guess, the lack of experience as well, given his first call up to the senior squad. So that's obviously going to be new to him. And these are two massive games, right? Japan and Saudi. It's not like you can sort of rest and, do experiments here and there. Like, these are two critical games where you've got to pick your best players. It doesn't matter if it's a 23-man squad, 26-man squad. We know it's 26, so perhaps there's a bit more leniency there, but he needs as many players as possible to be ready for these two occasions, because they're massive, right? There's no two ways about it. You were right, in the under-20 tournament, he was electric, right? He was one of the standout players, if not the standout. And obviously there's those links to Paul Ocon Sr. We know the career he had with the Socceroos as well, so probably a bit more pressure on his shoulders there. Hopefully he handles it well. But interesting, obviously the Max Ballard situation again. Fans have been crying out for his name, to be in the squad in previous selections, but hasn't been the case. But it just goes to show that there's a lot of potential, right? There's a lot of headaches for Popovic to have, and they're good headaches, to have selection-wise. So, hopefully Ocon can see maybe a couple of minutes of the Socceroos are 3-0 up against Japan, hopefully in the 85th minute or something like that. But it'll be a good experience for him nonetheless at that age.
Tony did say about Ballard as well that he knows what they think of him. So it sounds like that line of communication is really clear and open, which is good. And players going back to their clubs and knowing what they have to do to impress their national team boss is always a good thing. So it appears the plan is there for him. The last player I want to specifically highlight as well that you'll be happy to see back in the squad, Alessandro Chicati. He's been massive. He came back in a very quick recovery time from his ACL, managed to play in the last two league games for Parma, helped keep them up and earn a 0-0 draw with the eventual Scudetto champions Napoli. So that's a pretty impressive 180 minutes to finish off your season. He's back in the squad. He's a tremendous player. He's getting links with some of the best Italian national teams. For me, he goes straight into the lineup for Japan. He's that important of a player, especially with some of the other absences we have. And it's really just good to see him back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it was me personally, I'd have him straight in the lineup as well in the starting 11, but I just don't know how Popper's going to play this card. We've seen like some really weird selection choices from Popper in the past few games. Going back to the Japan game away from home where who was he that he played? Luke Braddon in the centre of midfield. It's like, that's a bit of a strange one. So he's made a few selection decisions where you sort of scratch your head and think, why has he done that? So And it makes sense if Chicati does start, given his form over those last two games, as you mentioned. He's so crucial to that backline. I think that's something that the Socceroos have been really missing in terms of that stability. And obviously his passing range as well, just to calm the back four. He's so important with his presence. You look back at Graham Arnold's tenure, he sort of played Chicati more as a fullback, which for me, it didn't suit his game style. He's more of a central player, central defender. So hopefully if Popper does play him, he utilises him in that right position. But he'll be critical, especially in this game against Japan and Saudi coming up, because his experience already, even though he's so young, he's to play the likes of man marking Lukaku, Napoli, obviously as you mentioned, Serie A winners. It's a tremendous achievement, right? To be man of the match as well. So he's going to be critical, and hopefully he does get the nod to start.
All right, just some other to note on, Christian. You can pick apart what you want from this list. Iran Kunda was actually overlooked for this squad. He was selected in the under-20s, as we know, as some World Cup under-20 preparation. Unfortunately, the news is that he has a slight hamstring issue, so he's pulled out of that under-20s camp as well. Craig Goodwin and Jackson Irvine are both injured. Goodwin has a foot problem that will require surgery that's going to happen in June. Of course, is the month we are now in as of the grand final in the A-League. And then the other A-League non-inclusion. So Noah Botic, Adrian Segacic, Nicholas Milanovic have all had various levels of inclusion with the national team. Botic, of course, stayed back with Western during the semi-finals. He was ineligible for the training camp. Given his exclusion in this squad, it would seem unlikely that he was in the frame for that as well. Segacic, we've seen him in the media recently talking about his eligibility with Croatia that is still on the line. Look, obviously we can't speak to the personal motivations of those comments in the context of the situation, but Tony Popovic has shown for me that he's not one that's going to get sucked into that kind of performative act. So if that was his intent from Sega, I'm not sure if that's going to work out for him. And then Milanovic as well, obviously he was a part of the training squad, which is good for him, and he's not in this team to go take on Japan and Saudi Arabia, but hopefully that foot is in the door now, and they've had a chat for him, and he knows what he needs to do to become a permanent member of this team.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at the forward options. So obviously Botic, you mentioned, carrying that injury was not really a possibility, but you got like Mohamed Touré in there. I think he's got about 10 goal contributions in the Danish league so far for his side. So that's like another inclusion where, I don't know, Papa could maybe bring off the bench, because that number 9 position is like, who do you play? Do you start Duke? Do you start Taggart? What do you think, Lockie?
It's a real question. Taggart's obviously been at Perth Glory, scored a couple of goals, but he hasn't had the consistent goal scoring run that you'd want from a national team striker in a big game. The likes of Motura has been scoring goals. Mitch Duke, I think, only got his just first of the J1 season a week or so ago. He's been playing off the bench for Makita Zelvia in J1. So there's not a lot of massive goal scoring options. Brandon Borello probably doesn't play his best football in the middle. I kind of like him off to the side a little bit. So where does that place him in the national team? Obviously, Popper's not afraid to play him up front. But Mo Toure has the runs on the board. Personally, I would have loved to have seen something like an Archie Goodwin or a Noah Botic, but obviously both those players, as you say, Goodwin definitely with his hamstring, and Botic we never really know quite where he was at. So it's tough. I have no idea what he's going to pick. I'm guessing probably Taggart, honestly, just with the whole familiarity of Popovic.
It feels like
but that's
more of a safe option.
That's a weak prediction. Yeah?
More of a safe option, I reckon. Taggart. I probably tend to agree with you. Probably Martin Boyle, he'll play as well. Again, a familiar player who he knows. I don't see anyone else sort of challenging for his spot. And then, it's sort of like a bit of a coin flip, really, for the rest of that front line. So I guess it depends as well on the tactical approach he takes into it, right, against Japan. Obviously, with a couple of players being rested, because Japan obviously are already through to the World Cup, so they don't really have to worry as much about qualification, which could work in the Socceroos' favour. So whether Popovic wants to go at it from the get-go, or really see out the game and just see where Japan are at in terms of how how intense they are, how they approach it from their end. So a lot of factors are gonna play into it for sure. And I'd just love to see the balance that he approaches it with from the first minute. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm fascinated by it.
Yep, it's a fascinating squad indeed. We're looking forward to the games, of course. Christian, thank you for your time today. If you're watching Monday or afterwards, we've also done a little bit of opposition analysis on what is a weakened Japanese team that has been selected for this window, you can check out that video here. Or if you're watching on Sunday, come back tomorrow and watch that video there. But Christian, thank you.
Thanks, Lachie.